Have you ever studied English for years and still felt scared to speak? That was me. I memorized hundreds of words. I watched English movies. I passed every grammar test. But when someone said, "Hey, can you help me?" my mind went completely blank. My name is Anna, and this is the story of the moment I realized I could finally speak English naturally. I had been learning English since I was 10 years old. At first, it was just another school subject, like math or history. I memorized words, repeated grammar rules, and filled notebooks with verbs and tenses. My teachers said I was a good student. I always got high marks in exams. But something was missing. Something I couldn't explain. When I spoke English in class, I sounded careful, too careful. Every word was planned before it came out. It wasn't natural. It wasn't alive. It was like reading lines from a script. Outside school, I almost never used English. I told myself, I'll speak when I'm ready. But ready never came. At the store, when I heard tourists speaking English, I wanted to say something, but fear closed my mouth. I was afraid of making mistakes, afraid they would laugh, afraid of sounding different. It's strange, isn't it? You can know a language for years, but still feel like a stranger when you speak it. In college, it became worse. Everyone around me seemed confident. They watched movies without subtitles. They used slang I didn't understand. They laughed easily in English conversations, and I felt left out. When my classmates practiced English together, I would smile, pretend to listen, and nod as if I understood everything. But inside, I was translating every single word, one by one, sentence by sentence, like a machine. By the time I found the right word to say, the topic had already changed, and I would stay silent again. Sometimes at night, I would lie on my bed with my phone, scrolling through English videos on YouTube. I wanted to understand them, really understand them, but my brain worked too slowly. I'd replay the same sentence 3 times. I'd pause to look up words, and when I saw people speaking fast, I wondered, will I ever sound like that? My friends didn't understand. They said, "You're so good at English. Why don't you speak more?" I smiled. I said, "I'm just shy." But the truth was, I didn't believe in my own voice. I could write in English. I could read English novels. But speaking? That was another world, a scary one. One day during a group presentation, I had to speak in front of the class. My hands were shaking. My heart was racing. I had practiced my part over and over again the night before. But when my turn came, I forgot everything. My voice cracked. The words felt heavy, unnatural. People listened politely, but I saw a few smiles, the kind that make you feel small. When it was over, I sat down quietly, pretending I didn't care. But inside, I wanted to disappear. That night, I went back to my dorm room and cried. It wasn't about embarrassment. It was frustration. I had spent so many years studying, yet I couldn't use what I knew. I felt like English was something far away, like a mountain I could see but could never climb. Days turned into weeks. I tried apps, online classes, grammar books, everything, but nothing changed. And then, slowly, I started avoiding English altogether. I told myself, maybe I'm just not good at languages. Maybe I'll never sound fluent. I began to lose hope. But deep inside, there was still a small voice, a part of me that refused to give up. Sometimes, when I was alone, I would whisper English words to myself. Simple sentences like, I'm tired today, or the sky looks beautiful. No one heard me. It was just me and my thoughts. And in those quiet moments, I felt a strange kind of peace. For the first time, English didn't feel like a test. It felt like a friend. Still, I didn't realize that this small act of speaking alone was slowly changing me. My mind was starting to let go of the fear. The grammar rules began to fade, and what remained was something more natural, something real. I didn't know it yet, but I was already on my way to the moment that would change everything. And that moment came one quiet morning in the most ordinary place. It was a Saturday morning, quiet, calm, like any other. The sun had just begun to rise, painting the city in a soft orange light. I had gone to my favorite cafe, a small place near the park, the kind that smells of fresh bread and warm milk. I brought my notebook, not to study, but just to write down my thoughts. I didn't plan to speak English that day. In fact, I didn't plan anything at all. I sat by the window, watching people walk by, a mother pushing a stroller, an old man feeding birds, two children chasing each other, laughing. For a moment, I forgot about everything. My exams, my accent, my mistakes. The world felt simple. Then something happened. A couple walked in. Tourists, I think. They looked confused, holding a map and speaking in English. The barista didn't understand them. He looked at me, a little desperate, and said, "Can you help them?" I froze. My first reaction was fear. Me? Help them? In English? I wanted to say no. But before I could stop myself, I stood up and walked toward them. The woman smiled at me. "Excuse me," she said. "Do you know how to get to the art museum?" Her voice was kind, slow, clear. And without thinking, without preparing, without translating, I answered. "Yes, of course," I said. "You go straight down this road, then turn left at the second light. You'll see a big fountain. It's right behind that." She nodded. "Thank you so much. You speak English really well." I smiled. "Thank you," I said. And just like that, they left. I sat back down, and then it hit me. I had just spoken English, naturally, easily, without fear. There was no hesitation, no voice in my head correcting grammar, no panic about pronunciation. For the first time, the words came from somewhere deeper, not from memory, but from comfort. I looked down at my notebook. It was still open, a half-written sentence waiting for me. But my hands were shaking, not from fear this time, but from realization. All these years, I had been waiting for a perfect moment to speak. And the perfect moment came only when I stopped trying. I remember walking out of the cafe with a strange mix of emotions, happiness, pride, and something like relief. The air felt lighter that day. Even the sounds of the city seemed different. The laughter, the engines, the wind. Everything sounded alive. Everything sounded like English. As I walked, I replayed that small conversation in my mind, the way my words flowed, the way I didn't have to search for them, and I realized something powerful. Fluency isn't about knowing every word. It's about trusting yourself to speak with the words you already know. For so long, I thought English was a mountain to climb. But that morning, I understood. It's not a mountain. It's a road. And I was already walking on it. That one small moment changed how I saw everything. I started noticing English everywhere, in songs, in shop signs, in conversations around me. But this time, I didn't feel nervous. I felt connected. When I watched movies, I didn't pause to translate. I listened and guessed the meaning from feeling. When I read, I didn't stop at every unknown word. I focused on the story. And slowly, English stopped being a subject and became a language I lived in. Of course, there were still mistakes. There still are. But I learned something important. People don't remember your mistakes. They remember your message. No one cares if you use the wrong tense. What matters is that you speak and that you mean what you say. That morning in the cafe wasn't just the day I spoke English naturally, it was the day I stopped being afraid of sounding imperfect. When I went back home, I wrote one sentence in my notebook. Today, I didn't speak perfect English, but I spoke real English. And that sentence became my reminder. Every time I opened my notebook after that, I saw those words, and I smiled. Because that was the moment I realized fluency isn't a destination, it's a feeling. A small, quiet confidence that grows each time you open your mouth. From that day on, I promised myself I would speak, even when I was scared. I would make mistakes, and I would learn from them. And most importantly, I would never let fear silence me again. And maybe one day, someone else will be sitting in that same cafe, afraid to speak, afraid to make a mistake. And maybe I'll be the one who looks at them and says, "It's okay, just speak, you'll be fine." Because that's how fluency begins. Not in classrooms, not in books, but in the small, brave moments when you finally trust your own voice. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed replaying that conversation again and again. Every laugh, every pause, every small moment. For the first time in my life, I wasn't judging myself. I wasn't thinking, was that grammar right? I was thinking, I really spoke. I really connected. It felt peaceful. For years, I used to believe that speaking English perfectly would finally make me good enough. But that day, I learned something deeper. Fluency isn't about perfection. It's about connection. I realized that when I was obsessed with rules, I wasn't actually listening. I was trying to pass an invisible exam. But when I let go, when I simply listened, reacted, and felt, the words flowed naturally. Not because I suddenly became smarter, but because I stopped being afraid. The next morning, I decided to do something I never did before. I walked to the cafe near my house, the one I always avoided because the barista spoke fast English. Usually, I would order online or just point at the menu. But that day, I smiled and said, "Hi, good morning. Can I get a latte with oat milk, please?" The words came out easily, smooth. She smiled back. "Of course. Anything else?" I didn't freeze. I didn't panic. I just answered, "No, that's all. Thank you." That simple exchange, that 2-minute talk, felt like winning a marathon. It wasn't about coffee. It was about confidence. From that day on, I started looking for small chances to speak with strangers, with friends, even with myself in front of the mirror. One evening, I stood by the window watching the city lights flicker. I whispered to myself, "So this is how it feels to think in English." It wasn't about translating anymore. It wasn't about fear or effort. It was just living in another language. And that was the moment I realized something beautiful. English wasn't just a subject I studied, it had become a part of me. Every mistake I made, every awkward silence, they were not failures. They were footsteps, steps that led me here, to this quiet confidence I never thought I'd find. I wish someone had told me earlier. You don't have to speak perfect English to be confident. You don't have to sound native to sound natural. You just have to be yourself in English. Because when you speak as yourself, not as a student, you don't just learn English, you start living it. And as I closed my notebook that night, I smiled quietly, not because I had finished learning, but because for the first time, I truly felt fluent, not in grammar, but in courage. When I think back to that moment, the moment I realized I could speak English naturally, I understand now that the real lesson wasn't about English at all. It was about believing in myself. Because language is more than words. It's courage. It's the sound of your heart trying to connect with the world. Maybe you're watching this right now thinking, "I'll never sound natural. I make too many mistakes. I don't think fast enough." I know that feeling. I lived it for years. But listen to me carefully. If you understood this story, you are already speaking English. Your mind is already thinking in English. You just haven't trusted yourself yet. You don't need perfect grammar to be understood. You don't need a fancy accent to sound confident. You only need one thing: the courage to keep speaking. Every time you listen to English stories like this, every time you think, "Oh, I understood that part," you are building something powerful, a quiet, invisible fluency growing inside you. You may not see it yet, but one day, just like me, you'll realize you're speaking naturally without even trying. So keep going. Listen. Repeat. Speak. Make mistakes. And keep moving forward. Because fluency is not a destination. It's a journey. And you are already on it. And before you go, if this story made you feel something, even a small spark of hope, I want you to write one thing in the comments. "I believe I can speak English naturally." Write it because when you say it out loud, you start to believe it. When you believe it, you start to live it. And when you live it, you become fluent. And if you enjoyed this story and want to keep learning English through real stories like this one, don't forget to subscribe so you can join me every week on this journey of English, courage, and self-belief. Because the next story might just be your story.